Hello and welcome to today's webinar. This is the Mobile and Digital Wallet webinar series, part 4, Strategic Considerations for Issuers. Hello, my name is Randy Vanderhoof, and I'm the director of the U.S. Payments Forum, an affiliated organization under the Secure Technology Alliance, which was formerly known as the Smart Card Alliance. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available for playback along with the presentation deck after the webinar has concluded today. Also, there'll be time at the end of this webinar for questions, so I encourage listeners to submit their questions using the user dashboard on your screen. I'll return at the end of the presentation to lead the Q&A session, and I suggest that you submit questions while the speaker is presenting so that we have time to organize them in advance so that we can get to as many of your questions as possible. You can go to the next slide. For those of you who are not familiar with the U.S. Payments Forum, here's a brief overview of who we are. The Forum is a cross-industry body focused on supporting the introduction and implementation of EMV and other new and emerging technologies that protect the security of and enhance opportunities for payment transactions within the U.S. The focus of the organization has evolved over the last few years from being singularly dedicated to EMV at its start and its mission that began in the U.S. market, to the broader focus today on other technologies beyond card and EMV transaction flow. Some current EMV-related topics that we are covering are the petro, transit, and hospitality merchants, those merchants that are late maturing in their adoption of EMV. Also, we're focused on EMV contactless and mobile acceptance testing and certification, which is one reason for today's webinar series, as well as covering issuer considerations for contactless EMV, dual interface, and offline data authentication. Our work supporting the adoption of EMV continues for those late market adopters, but also we're putting increased attention on education and addressing issues affecting payments that go beyond EMV, like mobile payment and tokenization, authentication, biometrics, future cardholder verification or CVM developments, and emerging standards addressing e-commerce channels like 3D Secure, secure remote commerce, and other new fraud mitigation tools to combat card not present fraud. Next slide, please. The U.S. Payments Forum brings together in an open forum of equals across the payments ecosystem, leading companies representing the global payment brands, financial payment issuers, merchants, processors, debit networks, mobile service providers, and other industry suppliers, integrators, associations, government entities, and transit operators in this forum. It's done through a collaboration on projects to develop resources to assist with the U.S. migration and implementation of these new and emerging technologies. And we do this through the production of white papers and other educational resources and the development of best practices and comments on technical recommendations for implementation. Our education programs for members in the industry include webinars like today's, other workshops, and forum member meetings where we provide tutorials and published resources. We also generate communications through our newsletters and to market outreach to share this information available for the market. Networking is also a major aspect of the organization, and many of our industry stakeholders have developed long, trusting relationships with other parts of the industry through the networking the organization provides. If anyone is interested in more information about the U.S. Payments Forum, please visit our website at uspaymentsforum.org. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this mobile and digital wallet webinar series is a product of two of our working committees, the Mobile and Contactless Payments Group and the Communications and Education Group. This is one of a continuing series of 4 educational sessions on mobile and digital wallets as part of a Lunch and Learn webinar series. Today is the fourth webinar in this series, and we hope all of you who participated in these previous webinars have enjoyed the series so far. For those who may have missed one or more of the previous webinars, you can listen to the recordings and access the presentations by following the link that you'll receive after this session and catch up on the complete mobile wallet landscape Lunch and Learn series. Today's webinar is going to be focusing on strategic considerations for issuers. Sorry for my cough, folks. So now let me introduce today's speaker, Dr. Art Harper with PSCU, the largest credit union service organization in the United States. As Director of Solutions Consulting, Dr. Art Harper partners with credit unions and other payment industry advocates to understand the credit, debit, and loyalty environment and how it applies to EMV, digital, and mobile commerce strategy space. Art has been involved in the U.S. Payments Alliance Forum as a board member and presenter representing the issuer community. Due to his efforts with this industry group, he has been able to lead PSU in becoming the first to issue EMV cards and achieve the fast track certification with the association. He is regarded as a leader in EMV migration movement, not only with PSU, but for the U.S. payments industry. So please turn to the next page and we'll begin with welcoming Art Harper. Art?
Yes, thank you, Randy. So good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Dr. Art Harper, and today we're, finishing up our Lunch and Learn series around the mobile wallet landscape. And today we're going to talk about the issuer consideration. As you saw earlier, we did have the Lunch and Learn series. We kind of covered previously to my presentation today. What is the merchant considerations? Prior to that, we also had the discussion from a technology standpoint. So what are the technology aspects that are needed or required or thought about as you're thinking of the mobile payments, and what does that mean as you think about the application within your, whether it be a merchant standpoint or an issuing standpoint. We'll expand upon that a little bit further today. And then, of course, the very first of our series was around getting an overview of mobile payments, the mobile wallet landscape, and is building upon each one of these aspects as we have moved forward throughout these Lunch and Learn series over the past couple of months. So once again, today we're going to kind of cover the issuer considerations of what an issuer kind of needs to think about as mobile wallet, from a mobile wallet standpoint, as well as from a cardholder perspective, from how they're going to use that mobile wallet. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we wanted to start out here and kind of talk about, what is the landscape looking like previously, and what is the landscape looking like today? So as you can see here, I'm going to start off on the left-hand side of our screen, and from a cardholder standpoint, the cardholder basically, 10 years or so ago had just a few options, right? From a standpoint of they used a debit card, they used a credit card, or obviously they used check or cash to make a payment at the point of sale for whatever goods or services that they were getting from that merchant. If we look over on the right-hand side of the screen, in the background, the associations, and other acquiring aspects from processing that payment, that is, from that right-hand side of the screen, this is, how everything took place, for a lack of better terms, behind the scenes, and the cardholder was getting that, approval or denial from a card standpoint, and so these things took place here. And for them, being the cardholder, they did not have really a lot of choices from, we'll call it, from a payment option standpoint, and thus from a financial institution standpoint, the only things that we really needed to think about at that point in time back then was providing the debit card, making sure that debit card obviously, had the functionality tied to it to process the transaction quickly and easily for the cardholder. Similar with a credit card, once again, just making sure the appropriate credit lines were there, authorizations were processed in a quick manner, coming back with the approval or denial based upon, right, the routing from that payment processing standpoint in the background. Next slide, please. Now, as you can see, a lot of changes have taken place, right, over those past few years. And so, first of all, we're not even talking about what's happened recently in the past few years with the implementation and rollout of EMV and tokenization, and we're also now we've had those rollouts of Apple Pay and Samsung and Android and those types of pays that have actually occurred out there. So as you can see from the right-hand side of the screen, the payment processing background from where that transaction, once it goes from that point of sale back out, you can see that's really stayed the same. There's really been no changes because, once again, we're just trying to get that information processed quickly back and forth to where it needs to go from the point of sale to the institution, understanding, right, coming back with an approval or denial. Is there money available on that credit card? Is there money available in that checking account? And from that standpoint, things have relatively stayed the same. No changes there. But as you can see on that left-hand side of the screen, the cardholders have now been presented with a plethora of options of how they want to conduct that transaction, meaning that, as I mentioned, right, so not only did we just change the way that plastics have worked, we've also now become and provided cardholders, i.e. the financial institutions, the ability to have multiple ways to offer the cardholder to now conduct that transaction at the point of sale. So they now have various options, whether it be from a merchant standpoint or whether it be for something that we're going to provide to them. So now it's understanding that there are multiple options for that cardholder. So as you can kind of see, with all of those options, they can actually get product information. So they can quickly and easily from their phone get information about that product, get a review about that product. How does that product function? Is there potential issues with that product that is being provided through various social media aspects such as Yelp, or whether there be something along those lines? Then they've got the choices from how they want to conduct that payment. So, if I'm looking at the next, box at the bottom, right? So from the payment standpoint, the mobile payment, now, am I going to use potentially, am I using, the Apple Pay? Am I going to use, or my Samsung Pay? Or, from a, Target standpoint, have I downloaded, now I'm using the Target Pay for this application, or Walmart Pay, or a Starbucks. So now I've got various ways that as a cardholder, right, I have the ability to now start making those choices of how I want to conduct actual payment. And that, as we'll talk about a little bit further here in a few moments, that now creates a little bit of a challenge for us as issuers, because once again, right, we want that cardholder to use our card, and our card, whether it be the plastic itself or whether it be in the phone, we want to make sure, and if it's loaded into one of those merchant applications, right, once again, we want that card potentially to be the first card listed in that wallet so that we can make sure that we're capturing that transaction. But also, right, from a mobile payment standpoint, we also have the loyalty and rewards aspect of that. And so from there, right, does the application that we're providing, right, does it allow, as a cardholder, does it allow me the ability to, for lack of better terms, right, redeem my points at that point of sale to pay for that purchase? Or does it allow me to use that for a portion of those points? Or from a standpoint of Starbucks, right, as I accumulate those options on my loyalty application that would once again resonate to my phone, do I get those types of things from buy one, get one free? Or do I get, using my phone, I accumulate those additional other points that allow me to once again get merchandise, get a product for free, or get some sort of points off at the end of the day. So once again, I have that information that needs to go into that mobile wallet as well, because I'm getting that information out from a cardholder standpoint, the convenience for me. And lastly, right at the very top, the offers and coupons. So that if I'm walking into a store, or if I'm walking by a store, is there a notification that's being applied to my phone that allows me to understand that today, if I go in, I'm getting 10% off of that offering for that product or that service? Or is it a buy one, get one free coming up this weekend, or something along those lines? All of these are now becoming what I would say that plethora of information that as a cardholder, I now have many, many more options of how I, the cardholder, want to conduct that payment. And within that, the ability for me now to understand what I'm about to buy. Do I have options of how I want to pay for that? And of course, am I going to pay for that with points? Am I going to use one of those devices, like I said before? When I say devices, those channel methods, an Apple Pay or Samsung Pay or whatever the case might be. And as an institution, is my card that top of wallet? Because now they have these choices, and I need to make and recognize that. So that, as you can see, the landscape from 10 years or so ago has definitely changed, and it's changed from a situation that now the cardholder has much more options, and they are much more educated from that standpoint. If you'll move to the next slide, please. And as we understand that, mobile transaction volume is going to increase. So as we're looking, and we're looking at these statistics, we've seen that incremental growth over time, and if we're looking at this year, 2019, the projection, of payment transaction volume in terms of dollars is at 113 billion. But if you look at just in a couple of years from now, now we're looking at almost a $76 billion increase in the amount of transactions that are going to take place. And why this is important to understand is that not only does that cardholder have all of those additional options out there, and as mentioned before of the movement, contactless is going to help spur this ability for cardholders now make more mobile payment options or transactions, due to the fact, that the merchants are now beginning to turn on that NFC functionality. And as we've seen that over the last couple of weeks or a month or so, we've seen several announcements due to that, and some of those announcements, coming from Target, coming from in the New York area, the Mass Transit Authority. We already knew from the Apple Pay standpoint some of the merchants that had turned on that functionality earlier, from the CVS, the Walgreens, the Costco's, and et cetera. While this may be a conservative number from an incremental growth perspective, we may see that these numbers actually change a good bit over that next 2 years, due to the efforts of contactless being advertised through the association. So once again, we're probably going to see maybe this number not grow from 76 billion. It could grow even higher than that due to that fact. So as issuers, we need to understand that, because we also understand that there's that contactless movement that once again is going to give more options to the cardholder or to our member at that point of sale to start making different choices of how they want to make a payment. And specifically, as they get more, as the functionality enhances and changes, we're going to see that happen. So once again, if you'll move to the next slide. Now that we know that, so let's talk to that for just a second, because they're having those options today, and so if we look to the left-hand side of the screen, and we see here that from a percentage standpoint, users that have actually used a mobile wallet at any point in time, we can see while Apple Pay has been around for a few years, we see a pretty low percentage there, as well as we see the low percentage with Samsung and Android. But we're seeing, obviously from an Apple Pay standpoint, we see a pretty decent percentage of 24%. And if we look over that to the right-hand side of the screen, we're seeing that ability here, right, from have they used one recently, right? So in their last few transactions, have they used a mobile phone to make a payment or use a mobile phone to pay for a purchase? We're actually seeing here that 6% have actually done that. So 24% initially have had that opportunity to make a payment, right, using their phone, but more recently they've had 6%. And once again, while this is important, it's due to the fact of, once again, having that NFC functionality turned on. And having that NFC functionality turned on, we have the ability to see and understand that there is going to be more opportunities as we move forward for more contactless / mobile transactions to take place. And that's going to be important for us to understand as we move forward. We go to the next slide, please. And as you see here, right, we wanted to kind of expand upon that just a little bit, right? We're very well aware of Apple Pay, and we're very well aware of what Walmart Pay has provided to cardholders over the last few years. But we also wanted to understand where else, right, from an industry standpoint, has cardholders actually been using their cards. So once again, we see Apple Pay there at 22%, right? But we also understand, right, Starbucks is an important one to recognize as well. And one of the reasons for that is because as I mentioned earlier, from a loyalty standpoint, right, cardholders want to use and will use, right, payment methods that are very convenient for them to use, but as well as not only from a convenience standpoint, they also want to get rewarded for their transactions. As all of us as a card holder, right, we want to use payment devices that, number one, are very convenient and very easy for us to use, but at the same time, we also want to get rewarded for our method, our payment of purchases. What also is important there to understand, as you can see from the left-hand side there of the screen, of how many people in the U.S. use mobile payment, that once again, that's significantly climbing. And as we see that, right, from a 2-year time frame, we see roughly about 14 million. And so what's important here to understand is that while that 14 million number representative here is climbed for us over that 2-year time frame, this is not even prior to that introduction of contactless into the market. And while that's important for us to understand, is that contactless will help us with this mobile payment adoption. And as issuers, we really need to start making sure that we understand what those components and aspects will be for us as we move forward. And due to that, right, is how will we maintain our current status quo, which is the fight for top of wallet flexibility in that space. If you'll move forward to the next slide, please. So really, what are the considerations for financial institutions? So we kind of gave a little bit of a background of what we know that's happening out there in the market today from an industry standpoint. So we kind of covered, right, initially up front, right, how the shift has changed. So we started talking about initially, right, 10 years ago, cardholders had not many options. Financial institutions really didn't have to have, we'll call it, much of a thought process in terms of those things that needed to be handled out there. 10 years later, we saw that now there's a plethora of options for the cardholder. Cardholder is now utilizing that phone to get information from a product standpoint, so comparison pricing. They're also now having choices of adding card information for that card aspect as well. And then, of course, we just talked about the growth, right? The potential growth of the mobile payments option. And, of course, the mobile payments option being accelerated potentially, right, through this introduction of contactless as we move forward. So as a financial institution, we understand that's all happening in the industry. We see that it's coming. We're seeing that the merchants are now getting into the game, right? As I said before, right? We now see that, right, Target's offering an option. We just saw the announcement recently, right, that that Kroger, right, has made the announcement this week, I believe, or it was the end of last week, that it's, now offering their, basically, not only are they offering a mobile payment option, but they're also offering their own card to be loaded in there. So as a financial institution, right, what do we have to think about as we start thinking about these mobile payments? So basically, we have to think about it in three main core aspects. So the first one, right, is all around the consumer convenience and the ease of use. So as I mentioned before, right, as a cardholder, right, they want something that is very easy for them to use. I don't want to have to really make a bunch of what we would call logins from, entering in PINs, not just the PIN for the transaction. I'm talking about the PIN to get into that app. Can I use a biometric to get there? And that was kind of covered earlier on in the technology section in that webinar. But how easy is it for me to get to that application to make that payment, right? And how easy, once again, is it for me to get there? But also, what is in it for me as the card holder? So as a financial institution, I know that's got to be number one for me, right? I want to make sure that it's convenient and easy to use. And when I think of that, I then have to kind of get right underneath there, what kind of integration do I have? So what kind of integration do I have with my core today? I'm already potentially, or should be, right, providing a mobile application today for my card holders to get information in reference to their checking a balance, saving balance, transferring of money. They have their alerts, they have their controls, they have the ability to potentially do disputes or a number of different features and functionalities on an application today that I give them. So as a financial institution, I have to make a choice. Do I have the ability to integrate payment options into that current phone today? Phone meaning the current application that I provide to them? Or, right, do I want to then, if there's not functionality is not available, do I need to go and do a native application? Meaning, do I want to give them or have to provide to them a secondary application for them to download to their phone? And if that's the case, then there's conversation that needs to occur from that standpoint as to say, what does that look like? What is from a branding perspective? And going back to the convenience and ease of use, now if I gave them two different applications, is that something that's really going to work for me, the institution? In addition to that, is it going to be something that's really going to get the adoption levels that I need from a cardholder perspective? Because once again, I'm finding for top of wallet. But lastly, right, I have to make sure from a security standpoint that all of that data, right, is secure. And that data, and once again, that's prior to one of the webinars, the second webinar around the technology aspect. I have to understand that that data is going to be safe and secure as I transmit it, right? It has to be encrypted. So from here, right, I have to then understand that's my convenience, my ease of use. And from that standpoint, I need to move forward. And next one is going to be around the merchant apps. So from the merchant apps, I have to recognize out there, as I mentioned just a second ago, Kroger has announced that they're providing an app, right? But not only are they providing that app that I can download my card in, they're now offering a card. So they have their own card that's going to try to take away from my top of wallet. Target has done that as well. And so from that standpoint, I have to understand, while that app is there for the cardholders from a merchant standpoint to help them with their shopping process, to get product information, comparison pricing, as I mentioned before, the reviews, now all of a sudden the merchant has become a competitor for me, the financial institution. So I have to understand and recognize that. I have to also then determine, how does that potentially affect me, right, as a financial institution? And then lastly, right, the last bullet point, as I just mentioned, is I'm fighting to stay top of wallet. And top of wallet for me is important because as a financial institution, my income is derived from interchange that happens from those transactions, and of course, potentially on a credit card, right, from the interest income standpoint. So I have to really now understand that, right, securing the transaction is vital for me for long-term sustainability as an organization, because for me to be able to provide those loyalty and benefits that we talked about earlier out there from a points standpoint or a cashback standpoint, I can only do those things if I'm getting the transaction. And for me to get the transaction is to really understand how I can maintain a top of wallet mentality that the cardholders are utilizing my card before anybody else's card, meaning that as they download them into these various wallets, how do I get there? How do I get there from an existing cardholder standpoint and from anyone new coming into the door getting one of my cards? So from a financial institution standpoint, convenience, ease of use, how easy is it for me? Can it integrate into what I have today? How do I compete against the merchant applications that are out there already presently? Because most importantly, I've got to maintain my top of wallet status, because that's my livelihood as a financial institution, is getting that transaction. If we move forward to the next screen, please. So if we understand that, right, we now are going to then develop what we'll call that product set. So what product is it that we're going to offer, right? I'm talking from a clockwise standpoint. What is that product that I'm going to offer? What wallets are those going to be? And once again, when I'm talking about those products and wallets, those products and wallets are part of that is it a default card before, or how do I make that my card the default card? That's when I'm thinking of those things. And once again, how do I compete against the other, we'll call it, ways that can be a payment can be applied, which is, right, the ACH, same day ACH, or those debit transactions. And of course, lastly, right, from a research and offer standpoint. So if you'll move forward, please, to the next slide. So understanding all of that, what do we need, or what are we going to do next, right? And so from there, here's what we are going to have to do next. So if you move forward to the next slide, please. We really want to have 3 steps, right? So our first step is we want to understand and we want to leverage, right, what our card processors are doing out there from a research standpoint. And what I mean by that is you know, our card processors, remember, on the back side of that transaction, they're really kind of doing the same things every day, but they are doing some different things in terms of roadmap. So what are they looking at out there to make that transaction flow a little bit quicker, a little bit easier? Are they looking at different technologies? Are they looking for that implementation, right, of, you know, we've seen and heard a lot of faster payments and real-time payments occurring, and you know, the use of, you know, lack of better terms, right, Bitcoin, or those newer types of digital technologies that are processing these transactions. So are those going to be implemented into the mobile space? Are there more opportunities, right, from an integration perspective? Are there additional ways that the card processor is looking to, right, make the transaction be a little more convenient, be a little bit more of a quicker flow? And so understanding, where's our card processors today, where are they looking at for tomorrow, and maybe the next and the next 2 years down the road after that. So what are they doing out there? So helping a financial institution, we need to understand, relying back onto them, what are they doing, and where are they moving forward to? Next, right, we also then need to learn of those new product sets, and let's be early adopters. Let's look to test those new technologies, and we're going to test those new technologies internally, right, with our staff, but we're also then going to engage some of our cardholders or / members, right, to get their understanding of how would a new payment option work for them, right? So how does that new mobile payment option work for them? So is it the phone? Is it a wearable? How does those types of things work for you? Is it easy to use, right? So once again, we've got to go back to that ease of use. Is it easy for you to use? Is there a way that I can have my card, right, my financial institution card, be the default when they open up that new wallet or when they download that wallet from the App Store? And so making sure that we have that testing. And then next, right, we want to also make sure that we're staying up to date, right? So just not only from our card processor standpoint that's giving us information about what they're doing, but let's also make sure that we understand what's happening out there in the entire industry. And the entire industry, right, being, various publications that may be out there today, but also having the involvement with the U.S. Payments Forum, right? The U.S. Payments Forum, as outlined by Randy earlier, is a great source because that source of information comes from 4 aspects, right? It comes from, today we're talking issuers. The last webinar was around the merchants, but we also have, right, we also have the associations and we also have the networks. All 4 of these entities are involved in the U.S. Payments Forum, and it gives a great opportunity to understand all 4 corners of what payment processing looks like. Where are they going? What are they doing? And what do they see for the future? So once again, as a financial institution, we have the ability to get a lot of information from a lot of different aspects that help us in our strategy on mobile payments, on mobile wallets, and what do we need to look at as we decide whether to move forward with which payment product or which option, right? And where do we want to lie at the end of the day in terms of that? So if you'll move to the next slide, please. So our next step right here is that from a financial institution standpoint, we're gathering all of that information, but what does all of that information really mean to us? Having lots of different conversations, the key word out there is a digital payment strategy. And really, what is a digital payment strategy? We hear that phrase used a lot, but we really now have to kind of really narrow in on creating a digital payment strategy, because we have moved, or we are moving rapidly, right, from the cash-in checks to the plastics. Now we are truly moving to the tap-and-go environment, and that tap-and-go environment, once again, contactless is moving us quickly, tap the plastic, but we're going to move to that mobile wallet. And as financial institutions, we really have to make sure we're getting that right strategy defined for us. And so we're really going to think of that in 4 different aspects from a payment strategy standpoint. So number 1, I have to determine what is my product set. So what are those products as a financial institution that I am going to offer that is going to allow me to be competitive in the market space with everyone around me geographically? So is that, is that the Apple Pays, the Samsung Pays, the et ceteras that are out there? How's that getting integrated? Is it integratable to what I have today? Is it a wearable that I need to focus on? So basically, what is my product set? And then next, once I have my product set, I then need to make sure, right, from a marketing standpoint, that I'm providing content and information out there to everyone, right, from a website perspective. So from the website, letting someone know and understand that I have those products and the features and benefits that allow me to be very competitive to anyone down the street. So whether it be, credit or financial institution A versus financial institution B, we're both competing for that card holder to come in and open an account with us and get our card. So making sure that we have that information on the website that shows that we're competitive. But in addition to that, right, also from a social media standpoint, where, outlining those aspects on social media, the ability to show those different things. And then here, and then making sure of that. And then nextly, right, we're going to move into the training. So marketing has provided all of the content out there from a features and benefits standpoint, whether it be on Take One, on the website, but now we have to train, and we have to train our staff, right, and our staff being from a financial institution standpoint, that's our contact center. Right? So making sure that our contact center can talk to the product, that mobile payment options that we've implemented. What are the features? What are the benefits? How do we compete against our competitors down the street? How do we stack up? What is our differentiators? Also from a training standpoint, right, we also then need to make sure that, right, our individuals that are in the branches, if someone's coming in, opening up that account, right, we're downloading that new mobile wallet in there with them while they're there. Oh, I see you have an iPhone. Let's go ahead and we're going to download that app. And so from there, when we're downloading that app, we're going to download that app and allow them to put our card in there immediately at that point in time to make sure that we're kind of top of wallet. We're number one. So the next time they start to use that as a tap and go as a method, we now know we're going to secure that transaction. And then lastly, right, from an operations standpoint, they have to kind of make sure that these first three areas are staying current, right? We're constantly on top of the product set, making sure that we're out there and competitive, making sure that the features and benefits are there, making sure that training is identified for all of our individuals, regardless of whether it's contact center or in the branch, that we're maximizing our opportunities to become and make sure we're top of wallet in those digital spaces so that we don't lose that transactional volume. And then nextly, right, how do we do all of that? How do we develop that, right? Normally what we're seeing now is we're creating what is known as, right, payments champions, right, in our organization. So that's either defined as a chief payments officer, it can be defined as a chief revenue officer, in some instances as chief experience officer, because once again, as a mobile wallet, right, it's all about the experience, the convenience, the ease of use. And if I don't have those experiences, then really I don't have that digital, I'm not securing that digital payment via that mobile wallet. And then nextly, right, as I understand that, I have to have a plan. As I mentioned before in the training, right, I have to have a plan. I'm going to identify how I'm going to get the new individuals coming in, opening an account, getting my wallet. I get that card in there, so I am downloading top of wallet mentality first, right there, number one there. But I also then have to have a plan, right? So that chief payments officer underneath that digital strategy is going to determine and create a plan of how do I get those existing card holders to be downloading my card to become number one top of wallet once again, because I do need that at the end of the day, because I've got to make sure that I'm securing all of the transactions that I can, because once again, top of wallet payments are my priority, because I have to have those payments for the ability to have interchange and interest income, once again, to be sustainable long term, right? So lastly, we move to the next step. Next slide, please. So I need to put all of this into action. So once again, I've learned about my processing background, right, what my processor's doing, looking what the industry's doing, because I've got my involvement in U.S. Payments Alliance. What is the merchants thinking in terms of their payment strategies? How does that compete against what I'm doing? What are the wallets that I really need to be thinking of? I've developed my options within my organization in terms of my product set, and I've developed my training, and my marketing is out there. And oh, by the way, now I have a defined plan. So now I've got to put all of that into action. And so from here, right, I'm going to make those announcements, right? I got to understand that not only do I have those things, but I also have to understand that technology is going to change. As I mentioned before, we've seen a lot of changes from a payments aspect over the last few years. We've seen from the traditional credit card and debit card standpoint, we moved rapidly from EMV to Apple Pay to tokenization and we're continuously moving forward very rapidly. And so we have to understand that's going to change. So that digital payment strategy has to be updated more than likely, probably on an annual basis. And so from a financial institution, we have to understand that. We have to understand what our wallets are today, what are our wearables, how well are they doing, what is our adoption standpoint, but also understanding that is, there's going to be changes that are going to occur. We may be adding loyalty options to that, as I mentioned before. The ability within my mobile wallet to make a payment at the point of sale using points. So understanding that strategy and understanding that it's going to change. Share that, right? Share that research as we're implementing it. Show that we have that thought leadership, because as a financial institution, right, we want to show that we're a leader out there in the space. Once again, that could be our differentiator, and our differentiator allowing us to show that we're adding those new features and functionalities. In addition to that, right, we demonstrate the ease of use. And most lastly and most importantly, right, as we move forward, we're making sure that we understand that the strategies that we have chosen, right, are secure and safe. That's the most important thing, because once again, we're dealing with, right, the financial, for lack of better terms, right, the financial livelihoods of our cardholders, and we do not need to have in any instance, right, that we are, having any challenges, right, with the security standpoint. So making sure that wallets that we've chosen not only are convenient, not only that they're easy to use, but in addition to that, right, the security aspect behind that, right, once again, data is secure back and forth. So those are going to be our 3 steps from an institutional standpoint that we need to think about as we move forward. Once again, you can define those down a little bit further, depending upon whether or not this financial institution is, potentially a bank, is it a credit union, right? How much are we an early adopter of new technologies, or are we not an early adopter of those 2 new technologies? That's all dependent. But then, as a high-level overview, what are financial institutions needing to think about, right? Once again, to summarize, right, convenience, ease of use, right? Is it integratable? Defining a digital payment strategy around those wallets that we define as our product set, and then, of course, making sure that all of the transactional and all of that data is safe and secure as we move forward into the future. Next slide, please. Randy, I'll turn it back over to you and see if we have any questions to answer.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Art, for that interesting perspective of issuers on the use of mobile wallets and payments. Just before we jump into the questions, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the online assessment and also some additional resources from the U.S. Payments Forum. So if we can go to the next slide. As I mentioned at the opening remarks, we've prepared an online assessment quiz for each webinar in this series. Each quiz is multiple choice, and there's less than 10 questions per quiz. So there is an online assessment quiz available for this webinar. If you participated in all 4 of the webinars and the assessments and passed them, you'll receive a certificate and a registration discount to the 2019 Payments Summit Conference, which will be held March 11th through the 14th in Phoenix, Arizona. The deadline for completing the assessments is March 1st, 2019. And if you have the links to the previous webinars and didn't participate in one of the assessments, you can go back and complete that assessment as well after you've listened to the missed webinar. The link on the bottom of your screen here is the assessment link to this most current webinar. So I'll give you a second or two to write that down if you'd like to do that before we end today's webinar. So if we can go to the next slide. I also wanted to point out 2 additional resources that you should take advantage of to further your knowledge about mobile wallets and digital payments from the U.S. Payments Forum. The first resource is the conference I just mentioned, March 11th through the 14th in Phoenix, Arizona. It's going to be combined with the U.S. Payments Forum member meeting, and you could participate in the Payments Summit and also learn about the U.S. Payments Forum by attending that meeting. If you're a U.S. Payments Forum member, of course, you are welcome to participate in both sessions at that event. Secondly is the Mobile and Digital Wallets white paper. It's called the U.S. Landscape and Strategic Considerations for Merchants and Financial Institutions, and there's a link on the U.S. Payments Forum website for this, which is an excellent resource document that describes much of the content that's been heard over this webinar series. And there are many other resources available on the U.S. Payments Forum website, so I would encourage you to go and visit those. So in the few minutes we have left, we'll jump into a couple of questions. Art, the first question is, how can issuers keep their card at top of wallet with so many other issuing institutions competing for space in those wallets?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the key and number one question, right, Randy? Because as I kind of stressed throughout this, throughout this presentation, right, as a financial institution, right, we solely rely on, right, the interest and interchange income that come from card transactions, and for us, the challenge is always being the number one card in there. And I think, going back to earlier, there's two strategies. I think the strategy number one is financial institutions have to have a plan, and having that plan is, number one is when the individuals walk in the door brand new, having that strategy that when we're at account opening, helping them download those wallets that we have already offered. And as we're helping them download that, right, we're also then downloading our card in there to be number one. We don't want to rely on the card holder to leave, as a brand new card holder to leave out the door and rely on them to do it later on. We want to go ahead and get that done immediately up front. Also, if we're, we need to spend the time with them, we need to get more, I would say from a lack of better terms, right, we need be more consultative and take the approach of adding that in immediately, spending time with them in those other channels, right? So do they have Amazon Prime, PayPal? Let's go ahead and as they're brand new in the door, let's go ahead and take the moments and get that card downloaded in there to be top of wallet for every one of those, what I would call those, call them, for lack of better terms, I'm going to call them no-brainer, right, transactions, because they're using whatever that card is already on file. From an existing standpoint, we have to think of strategies, how we're going to do that. How do we, if they've left out the door already and we got to get them to be top of wallet, it's really going to rely upon, from my perspective, it's got to be around an incentive. So how do we incentivize them to move that card to top of wallet? For example, if I've got 3 cards loaded in CVS Pay today, I'm not going and looking at card 2 and 3 to make that payment, so it's automatically tap and go. So I've got to incentivize, right, to show how I can get the top of wallet, to move that card to top of wallet, and whether that be through a loyalty option of points or cash back or gift cards, and introducing the staff to probably do that when they have individuals on the phone as well. Those would probably be the strategies I would think of.
Okay, thank you. Will contactless cards soon to be issued reduce the demand for issuers to participate in mobile wallets?
No, I don't think so. I think it's actually going to be the opposite, in my opinion. I think the push right now from to turn on the contactless terminals is only going to assist us from a mobile wallet perspective. So card holders are going to have that tap and go features. They're going to get more and more comfortable with that, right? But that's just the plastic itself. The mobile wallet is going to, from a by my financial institution standpoint, is really going to start providing us additional options, as I mentioned earlier, especially if I have a loyalty program, right, tied into my current card offering. And now from a mobile phone, right, I can then push an offer to them to say, would you want to pay for this purchase at the point of sale with points? And giving them different options, I think, is going to, the phone is going to be, I'm going to call it step 2. Step 1 is contactless. We're getting the merchants to turn on all of the functionality for contactless payments, tap and go, right? We all struggled from a financial institution standpoint with Apple Pay and the adoption levels, but now we're going to get that with the contactless push. And that's only going to allow us to now get to the mobile payments, and mobile payments are going to give us additional features and functionalities that we can have that will allow us to, once again, the challenge will be making sure we're top of wallet in those wallets.
Okay. you mentioned the choices that issuers have between doing their own app or issuer wallet versus tapping into a native or a device wallet. For an issuer that is just starting out, what will be your recommended strategy for looking at both of those choices?
I think that's, and that's probably one of the ones that goes back to, philosophical, like how do we want to make this convenient and easy for our cardholders? And once again, I think that boils down not only to the fact that we want to make it convenient and easy, but as a financial institution, right, what are my resources? So what do I have in terms of, dollars and, from lack of better terms, right, we'll call it those skill sets. So, if I'm starting out, if I don't have the true dollars to be able to do the integration, I probably am going to have to go with that native app, and understanding that, for a period of time, my cardholders may have those two applications or two devices that, they're going to get their information from, one to make a payment, one to get information from. Ideally, right, I'd like to have one. So if I can take the APIs and create one holistic experience, that's great. But I think, once again, it depends on, two things, right? One is, do I have the dollars and resources to be able to do that? If not, then we know native. But if I do, then obviously I want to go holistic route.
This will be the last question. Art, it's about security. What makes mobile wallets as secure or more secure for issuers than issuing their own bank cards?
We had that webinar, right, around the technology piece, but I would say, from my perspective, I think the important piece here to understand is, that all transactions should be, right, and it should be, processed through an encrypted, tokenized environment. So whether that is actually occurring through, my plastic today, or whether it's, through a mobile wallet tomorrow, I think the key here is just understanding that, it is a tokenized, encrypted transaction. So, is there a preference one direction or the other? I think it goes back to what is the most convenient form of way that I can process that payment most effectively.
Great. Thank you, Art. And so we are at the top of the hour, so I want to thank you all for participating in today's webinar. Also, special thanks go to our presenter, Dr. Art Harper from PSU, for today's content. Here's his contact information. If anyone would like to follow up with any questions to Art or myself that didn't get addressed, you can do so now. And also, if you want to contact me with any feedback to today's webinar, please do. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be available for playback along with the presentation deck after the webinar is concluded. And you'll receive an email with a link to where you can listen to the recording and download the presentation. Please feel free to share this link with others in your organization who were not able to participate in today's webinar. We certainly enjoy having as many people as possible have access to this content. So this concludes today's webinar. Thank you all for your participation and have a great day.